He works for jail. Say the word again. Jail, which is a, so Koreans amongst you will forgive my pronunciation. It's a subsidiary of Samsung. He's currently working for them. It's the in-house marketing agency, and he's involved in regional analytics practice and partnerships. He publishes a lot of academic papers and is recognized by many big names for his contribution to open source software. Well done. Ari, we all know. Kelvin Kim, we heard from this morning. He's the co-founder and CEO of ID Inuk, which is the #1 mobile research platform in Korea. He's got 650 clients and 1,500 projects per year and has grabbed 80% market share. And we have Royden Shia. He works for Tencent. He's the senior insight manager at Tencent, responsible for corporate brand building and new business development. Before that, he was global insight manager for P&G, Procter & Gamble. He knows the Chinese, ASEAN, Indian, and North American markets. Your moderator for this afternoon is Baron. It's all yours, sir.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you guys had a very good lunch and are not feeling too sleepy already. So how many of you had coffees to wake you up before you came to this session? Okay, at least 1 or 2 people. So the way I'm planning to run this session is I'll have some questions which I have discussed with the panelists, which I'll be asking. You guys can jump in at any point of time to ask a question based on what they have responded. Just raise your hand. Irene at the back will come with a microphone to you so that you can ask your question. Let us know, and we'll be happy to make it more interactive and answer as many questions as would be pertinent to all the audience. So just to start with this, so I would love to understand more from you guys about how Internet of Things and all that data which comes along with that impacts market research, and how do you use it in your existing businesses. All of you come from very, very different industries. You come from insurance, you come from pure data collection, market research. Tencent is everywhere, so I cannot put you in any industry. You do too many things. So it would be good perspective to understand how it impacts different verticals.
Yes, so I think before we go into Internet of Things and around the insights that we try to pull, first of all, I'd like to mention social media. There is so much data that is floating around there. Just to share a bit that there is light data and dark data that we can get from social. So light being platforms that's open for public to be analyzed, such as Facebook and Twitter. And there's dark data, which is like closed messaging platforms such as Line, WhatsApp, that we cannot analyze. So we're trying to use platforms such as Radian 6, which is essentially a social media listening platform to listen into all the conversations that's happening that's related to our brand, and then also related to our industry. Beyond that, as shared earlier, that in Indonesia, the insurance segment is still very new. So we look at different lifestyle trends coming in from the social media conversation. This allows us to be able to get real-time insights from the conversations and do something that's very specific for particular groups in the market. We are currently actually building the first social media command center in Indonesia. What it allows us to do is essentially it will be a physical room. Imagine a scene from CSI with a lot of monitors. And with that large property, we can essentially deep dive into insights into real time. For example, we know that in February there's Chinese New Year and there's a lot of rains in Jakarta, so probably we could anticipate that floods will happen. So what kind of content can we produce that's valuable for our consumers to start engaging with them and educate them to prevent risk from flooding? So part of the social media command center infrastructure is also a video production studio. So we are hiring people from the TV industry to actually produce video content on a regular basis So imagine in the flood scenario is that for us, we can produce like 2-minute to 3-minute videos on a weekly or daily basis that would help them to prevent from particular occasions. So this is just one example on how we can use social media data to build relationship, build the trust, and hopefully also solve critical problems when, for example, corporate crisis communication happens. We could immediately act upon that through the social media command center. We can have our own CEO to go down and respond to critical issues right away.
Thank you. That's very interesting. And specifically in this part of the world, we haven't seen too many of these command centers. It's usually you see in American movies and TV series. It's great to see that you guys are bringing such technologies and best practices in this part of the world. So thank you so much.
I want to start with a macro environment around us recently, because there are more connected devices around the world than people in the Earth. There are more than 7 billion connected devices as of the end of 2014, which means it becomes more easy to get a lot of data. However, there is a very big challenge to integrate those data together. There is also the Twitter and social network stream, and there is also the CRM data inside of every company for their own customers, and there is also the data part from the market research agencies provide. But if we cannot easily integrate all those data together, it will make a huge bias to understand the atmosphere. So I think there should be a focus on how and how long does it take to integrate, because there should be a time frame of each data and effective data date of the specific data set. So I want to focus on those kinds of integration part.
Thank you so much. I mean, that adds another dimension to the discussion. So in addition to the social, how you get data from beyond the smartphones and the tablets, that's resonates with the theme of our discussion, that how Internet of Things will give you more data to have a deep dive market research rather than just what we understood traditionally. Like 5 years back, it was web only. Now it's social and chat apps. And the next thing is gonna be all these devices, the beacons, the smart home devices, which will tell you more stuff. And you can customize your offerings much more better. So now I would love to hear about what Tencent thinks about this.
I think I can share a couple of actual cases we are already doing day in, day out. So in this world, so everything is so much connected, right? I think the first thing we do in Tencent is not even externally, but internally. We have the employee forum. So then makes everybody connect with each other. And every day people post all their complaints, their thoughts, their ideas, then they can do everything. It's like some guy, they challenge the company strategy. Previously, if a entry-level manager, if he wants to be heard by the CEO, it's impossible, right? Because there are a couple of bosses up there. And then, but this time CEO saw it. And then he replied to him. And then it makes the whole company discussing about that question. So this internal, I think, is also very interesting thing that we're doing. And externally, it's like for Tencent, one of our products, like QQ, have 500 million users, so which makes the survey very nimble and easy. We just send some survey to 100 million, no, 1 million, and then come back with a couple of thousand in 24 hours. Then we have that instant answers about how they like something, their attitudes. This is just one case. A further case is that we have the daily social listening council that can help us understand whether our PR events or some media reports would create any negative or positive impact to the company reputation. And then we can do respond to that tomorrow. Then, so it's like every day. We launch this, we read the social media at night. Tomorrow, we do something new. And then this is the way how we use a very interactive way. And the third case is that because we have those user data, and we can also track their profile. So it's like their gender, their age, their income, how do they spend their money, in that way, we can very easy to create some internal segmentation. Then there are two things we can do. We can very easy to targeted advertise to them. We decide, okay, who are the consumers that we want to reach, and then send the ads to them. Or second thing is that we can also internally refer the products to the right consumers. It's like via QQ or via WeChat. We just tell him, hey, there is a game you might be interested in, because we already know their profile and their behavior, and they love it. And then internally we create this ecosystem. So I think this very connected world help us to make this very nimble, fast, and interactive approach.
Okay, one interesting fact is you said that you could push surveys to 500 million people and you could get a lot of responses. So what's the incentive for the users to give you that data? And that question actually comes to both of you, because that's a primary product for you as well. But how do you incentivize users to give you that data?
Thank you for your question. I think we need to do it differently. So traditionally, we give incentives, right? Money. And of course, you push it further to make it cheaper. We give them the QQ dollar.
Okay.
QQ dollar is like the
virtual
money
currency
that you can use in the game.
Okay.
Right? You can like decorate yourself, buy yourself a virtual hat, whatever. Okay, it's free. But they love it because this is what people need. And secondly, you can make it very interesting and fun. It's like gamifying your questions, right? Hey, check this out, and then a couple of interesting questions. And maybe after they answer that, they can also post on their social media and compare with their friends. That is not make it a job, but something, an entertainment, that they can do it during lunch, during dinner, before go to bed. Yeah, this is something we are trying to do. Yeah, of course, it's far from perfect,
Sure.
but it's just something that's very convenient and very fast.
So how many guys on this floor have received some of those surveys and actually filled these from Tencent or any other company? How many of guys in this floor have actually done these surveys? No one?
There's still a long way to go for Tencent.
No, because I'm just trying to understand, because a lot is being done in how you get users to voluntarily share that data instead of silently pulling that data out, like let's say how a social network would do. And I just wanted to understand, like, have you guys given your data voluntarily to any of the companies? Yes, please, ma'am. Could we have the mic for the lady, please?
NTUC sends out to the NTUC members,
Mm-hmm.
and it's again targeted. Are you of a certain age? And then sometimes it's a banking one, sometimes it's a consumer behavior and things like that. It's fine. The incentive would be your NTUC points. So because it's a closed system, it's easy to get your rewards that way.
Okay. And how frequently would you do that? Like, would you participate in all of them, or like once in a while?
I was enthusiastic at the very beginning, but after a while, when it came to some of the more sensitive things like banking, and then I'd be more hesitant about disclosing everything. But yeah, so I think the impact is probably the most at the very beginning when you have your NTUC points and all. But when it comes repeatedly and in the same format, then there is a bit of a
Decline
there. Yes.
Okay, great. So Kelvin, how do you handle that? So lady raised a point that in the starting you're very interested, and over a period you get bored, and then like it just not remain as exciting. How do you keep your users engaged?
Very, very challenging question that. So basically, we reward our panelists to answer those questions, but that's the very basic stuff for that.
Mm-hmm.
And I do believe there is huge difference between legally right and emotionally right, which means there are a lot of consumers who are responding a lot of surveys around the world every day. However, some surveys are well designed to ask very politely and very well to know their specific information. However, some surveys are not that designed well to collect the data properly, which means it's like let's say you are the very first time to survey this platform, and the panel should be more engaged before he or she respond to the longer survey. because that is the start of the relationship between the company and the consumer. So I think there's a step for that. So besides the rewards originally itself, but you should acknowledge and make very good relationship. And that is derived from the user experiences of the survey respondents are experiencing through the platform.
That's very interesting when you say that difference between legally right versus emotionally right, because that's a very thin line, and it's very few companies are able to identify that thin line. There was so much controversy about Facebook manipulating the timelines of people for doing an experiment to make them feel good or feel not so good. So that's a key challenge for everyone involved in this domain, because with great power, with great data, you have much more responsibility in how you handle it. So Ari, it's a question for you. You are in the financial services domain, which is insurance. So insurance is very much emotional. No one is happy to buy insurance. People buy insurance because they were expecting that in case something bad happens. So how do you handle that challenge of selling people something which will be used only in a bad day?
Yeah, I think that's the problem that we face, right? Insurance, again, is not being bought, it's being sold to by the traditional channels. And how do we change the negative way of selling? Because traditionally, insurance is being sold through fear, right? In case something happens to you tomorrow, what would happen to those left behind, right? So we are shifting away from product-based selling to more on emotional selling. That's why over the past couple of years, we've tried to engage with a lot of storytellers in Indonesia and to build a great content that they can relate to. So based in our last campaign, for example, we did an education investment fund, and we created a short movie that tells a story about a relationship of a father and a son from they were born to until they were married, right? So the idea is how we can start building that emotional bonding and trust through stories. And the thinking is, how can we take it even further and personalize it, right? Because in the end, one story doesn't fit into everybody's life experiences. So we're looking into how we can use social media data to even personalize it more. So one example is, again, relating to this wearable that we created. So we created this calculator where you can actually see how much it will cost to send your child to university in 18 years' time. But traditionally, finance calculators just show you the numbers. But we take it even further because we created a little storybook on our digital campaign site so they can visualize the journey. And then we also recommend the type of skills that is needed for that particular profession that they choose. In our next project, we're also looking into experimenting with VR, if you are familiar with Oculus Rift. Essentially, what we can do with VR is within 2 minutes, we can fully immerse the consumer into vertical storytelling. So we can pull data from social media, in this case, Facebook or Twitter. We can personalize the VR experience based on their data. So imagine a person waking up inside this VR in a bedroom, but the photo on the wall is a picture of your family album from Facebook, right? So we're continuously seeing about what technologies we can use to actually relate directly with the consumers better. But the key here is not to be bogged down with the technology, but to be able to tell better stories so people find the need, discover the need themselves to protect their families.
Wow, that's an impressive way to sell it. I've never seen insurance people talk of this way of selling. It's usually about the fear tactics, but it's very refreshing to see that as marketeers, we are all evolving to think beyond what has been the traditional way of selling and conveying our value. Coming to that, one other thing which I want to learn from you guys is, in terms of actually doing those things, do you rely on third-party vendors or you want to do it in-house? Because there are cost-benefit analysis associated with that, with getting like a big data vendor who specializes in getting all this data, like an IBM or SAP or an Oracle Data Logics. that comes with its efficiencies, but then your data either is going out and you're not building in-house competencies. So in terms of that model of ownership of this data and nurturing this data, what's your view? Should you do it in-house, you outsource? How do you do it?
So I think in Tencent, we do work with external suppliers. So the way we do it is that, of course, we still keep our user database. Of course, this confidential, right? Business secret. But we will also work with an external agency to leverage their expertise to really understand the insights and share some data with them, or maybe even help them to do the survey and they can process the data and giving back the report and summary. I think this is the way. It's also our choice because for Tencent, our job is to really provide some best-in-class internet products, right, to improve life. And we are not going to be like market research experts. Yeah, if we try to do it, that would definitely distract our focus. And then we will not do it very well, to be honest, even though we have the data. So I think is to really leverage the strengths both sides have and then the hybrid.
Okay, that's interesting. Kelvin?
I think that's highly dependent on the purpose of the data you're handling. So for the internal use or for the, yes, everywhere there are privacy concerns. So you cannot export your internal data to outside agency. It is not that easy for everywhere. However, in some cases, a certain type of data cannot answer everything, which means there were several interesting discussion at the morning about the passively collected data, and it clearly shows and demonstrates how or what or when they do. However, it cannot answer why they do that. So if you want to combine the why and the other passively collected more, what can we call that, the objective data set, you should ask the other third party to integrate those data. However, for decisions insidely or internally, you should store and process the data internally, I think.
Okay, that's a good way to look at it, and you define a good line in those two things. I'll come back to my question which you raised from this about the privacy, but first I want to learn about finance. How do you guys handle it? Because financial data is most sacrosanct in all the countries. How do you guys handle it? Do you store it in-house or who do you work with?
Yes, so all of the data that we capture even from social media right now is being stored in-house. We have a special agreement also with Radian 6, they're part of Salesforce.com, to actually abide with the European privacy regulations. So, but in every aspect that we do around customer data, we always consult with our legal departments and also ensure that the regulating body is involved because there's still a lot of gray area in this space. But it shouldn't stop us from trying to innovate and get insights from the data. Now, the question around whether building the capability or outsourcing it, I think it depends on the organization, but the reality in Southeast Asia right now, there is still a lack of resources, of people who are able to deep dive into data. So data scientist is one of the hardest jobs, I guess, globally, and definitely in Asia. So currently, to do the qualitative analysis, we have a center in India that does all the data crunching on a daily, weekly, and a monthly basis. But locally, we're also building a local team to build the capability to analyze the data. So the plan is to actually start to build the capability in-house over the longer term. But it doesn't happen overnight. So it's a continuous learning process.
A question for the audience. How many of you are scared about your data being used by marketeers, by social networks, and any example of when you felt that your privacy was breached by any of these companies?
I mean, I'm quite fascinated how much the effect of Edward Snowden's revelations have had on people's willingness to share their personal information. Certainly in Europe, because the spooks, particularly in the UK and the US, are mining this data for nefarious, we think, purposes. I'll just ask the question, have you noticed any reluctance since the Edward Snowden revelations to share data for market research purposes?
How many of you have seen Edward? Okay, we have one. Okay, great.
when we talk to some of the customers, these are actually business customers, is that they do have concerns about data security, primarily because people move between technology companies, and there is a concern that all these staff moving are taking data with them. So however good the rules are or the regulations are, there is a concern about database security by virtue of people just sort of shifting around the industry. And I think this, I mean, I've been, so I get calls all the time saying, oh, do you want to have, come to a sports club and get a free, a health assessment? And I'm pretty sure that was a database taken from another gym that I was a member of. So I think this happens all the time.
That's interesting, and specifically, the governments are using sovereignty as a key reason for creating regulations, and absence of crystal clear regulations are impacting the company's ability to define those solutions. So I'll ask specifically Kelvin. South Korea has been on the forefront of privacy regulations, and in this part of the world, they have been the most advanced in that respect. So what kind of challenges have you faced in that domain?
There is the minimum, which mean by that is the legal requirement by country. So it is not the fact you can manipulate or you can challenge the legal aspect. However, in the practical term, and when we go to the more practically, I think privacy is not about collecting less. It is about collecting more transparently. Which mean by this is traditionally a lot of service providers have a very long and boring user agreement that you never read before. And you agree with that, and there's no option out there to not to use the service, but opt out specific data set. For instance, our company is very transparently have a written consent with our users for specific study, like who will collect the data and how long the data will be stored, and for what purpose this data is collected, like that. And our panel can very easily opt in or opt out the process. So even though they opt out that the consent or the privacy is for the privacy issues, they are not affected about their usage of the service. So I think that is about transparent processes rather than the legal aspect.
For your case, in China, the laws work very differently from most of the countries. Have you faced any specific regulations or government guidelines on how to collect, store, manipulate, and monetize that data?
To be honest, I think China hasn't had yet such very clear guidelines for this.
So it's good for you then. You can monetize much more, send a lot of more messages.
I think that is yes and no. So as a market research manager, I think it's very easy to collect data. But for Tencent, such a big company, we don't want to bear any such risk, such legal risk, right? So the way that Tencent do it is that even without those regulations, in our survey, we still try to state how the data would be used, and then their individual information would not be shared outside. So just like in QQ and WeChat, our two biggest apps, right? We store all those users' details every day, day in, day out, like where they live and their age, right? Whatever.
Do you store their chats as well?
Hmm?
Do you store their chats? So whatever I write on WeChat, do you index that and serve me ads based on what I type to my friends?
Of course, because it's stored in the cloud, right? And then this is what they need.
I'm slightly scared now.
But the thing is that from day one I joined the company, we will notice that you are never exposed to those data. So nobody can release it, not even our CEO. So it's like it's very strictly kept. So this is, I think Tencent as a big company knows where the risk is, and when trying to avoid those risks.
What do you do with that data if even your CEO cannot read it? What do you do with that data then? Who will read it? I mean, what will you do with it?
The users would use it, right? First is like what you chat with your friends when you want to search, and secondly is that those data So for all those individual information, we will not release. But like as a massive database, we can still like read a trend and all those without any personal privacy. We can do that. We learn, okay, what's the genders, proportion, right? And then how many users today and how many users left our app tomorrow, things like that. Yeah, this is, but never on the individual level.
So it's like an aggregate trend level.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, okay. That's a good way to look at it. I just got a bit scared that tomorrow I'll start getting push notifications in WeChat, buy this or buy this, those kind of things. That's another aspect to look at it. Another aspect which you brought about wearables, how do you think these new devices like wearables, smart devices, and have you guys already experienced collecting data from these devices?
Yes, as shared earlier, I think the biggest disruption in the insurance industry will come in from the Internet of Things and wearables. And we shared earlier about the telematics, which is the automotive connected cars, but moving closer to where we are, which is digital health, right? So all the Fitbits, Nike Fuel data is actually being utilized by insurance company already in the Silicon Valley to provide dynamic pricing. So there is a startup now that works with another startup insurance company that essentially uses a wearable called Misfit. So what they do is you are asked to install an application on your smartphone that will connect on your activity data. And it will build a profile of how healthy you are in a particular day. And we will show you the trend whether you will actually go to the gym or not, and you are obliged to report and take a picture of yourself if you go to the gym as a proof. And the rewards are clear. If you go to the gym that day for the entire week, 5 times a day, you will get a 5% discount on your premium that month. And the punishment is also clear. If you skip the gym, you will also get a hike in your premium. So this dynamic pricing modeling is going to disrupt the insurance. So our actuarial team is also trying to adapt with analyzing real-time data and provide better pricing, so better solutions for the customers. Now, in terms of the discussion that we had earlier, I think there is an interesting topic brought up by Kevin Kelly, which is the founder of Wired Magazine, and he told that essentially there are 2 ends of the spectrum, which is personalization and transparency. In order to be able to provide better products for the consumers, you need to be able to provide transparent information to the brand or to the service, right? You can't have both at the same time. So what was mentioned earlier is it's true. In the end, privacy is not about keeping all the data, but ensuring that the customer knows exactly what is being shared. There will be customers who will not want to share the information, but from what we see in a market like Indonesia, the need to get personalized or being connected socially, share that data to the world, is even more than controlling the information by yourself. So it's an interesting space, but you will see in the next 2 or 5 years that big data and Internet of Things, insurance will be the first one to monetize it.
So who in this room will love to buy that band which reduces your insurance premium? Do we have any candidates who would love to buy that? No one? So no one exercises in this room? No one? Come on, guys, don't bring that much shame to the marketeers industry. No one? No gym person? That's sad.
Can you wrap up there, Jim?
Yeah. So, thank you for sharing that special product. I would love for that product to come to Singapore very soon. So, in terms of summarizing our discussion, we talked about how companies are distinguishing between dark data and light data, using different tools like Radian 6 to analyze those specific things. Tencent is on the other spectrum where they have a lot of data, where they keep humans out of it and have machines to learn from it to personalize their systems. Another key aspect was brought by Kelvin about how's the difference between legally right and emotionally right and the ethical way of doing things. So for us, we got to learn about 3 different verticals and how they're balancing these things. And it's very good insight for an industry to see the industry leaders are thinking about being morally right instead of just blankly thinking about making money. And from where I see it, it's a very good sign and healthy sign for our industry as it matures. So we look forward for the industry to mature, and you guys can interact with the speakers after the event if you have any specific questions as well. Thank you so much for being part of this discussion.
Thanks very much for the panel. Thank you.